Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Maryal Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care. Angela Mondor, also known as the Geeky Girl, hosts the Overgivers Anonymous podcast, guiding listeners towards balanced living and business success. She's also dedicated to empowering neurodivergent entrepreneurs. As the creator of the Rockstar Business Planner, she provides strategic planning tools that help business owners achieve their goals. Angela facilitates the Rockstar Success Circle and the Rockstar Mastermind, of which I'm very grateful to be a part of, offering continuous support and motivation to foster sustainable growth. Specializing in minimizing obstacles for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, she ensures their business journey is smooth and rewarding. Additionally, as a verified consultant for ClickUp, Angela streamlines workflows to boost efficiency. With a passion for helping others, she shares valuable insights on personal growth, business planning, and productivity. My DPC Story listeners, I am so excited about today's conversation. This is being recorded at the beginning of the last quarter of 2024. And many people think about last quarter, oh my God, what am I going to do? But not Angela Mondor, who is going to be talking with us today. Angela is somebody who is amazing. I know her personally. She has helped me organize my own business, but also helped teach me ways to not freak out when it comes to the last quarter of the year and how to be prepared. And so for all of us DPC physicians, entrepreneurs, people who don't have an MBA, but yet we're killing it at business, this episode is for you. So welcome, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes, we are. We always do. So this is my reflection back on being an entrepreneur back in 2021 when I was a doctor leaving fee-for-service and had no experience looking at or planning quarters in advance and not having an MBA. I joke about that because I'm in that bucket myself. But I wanted to start us off with this idea that you are also an entrepreneur. So can you tell us about how you have gotten to the point you are at today in terms of being able to say, absolutely, it's the last quarter and this is what I'm going to do? Because I'm guessing that that wasn't always the case.
It wasn't always the case for sure. And I don't have an MBA either. I believe in the School of Hard Knocks, but becoming an entrepreneur has been its own best practice in getting better at all the things I need to get better at, personally and professionally. When I first became an entrepreneur, I mean, hilarious, right? I mean, it depends on what you identify as an entrepreneur, because since I was 18, I started trying things. And even in high school and junior high, I didn't have a job. I was a babysitter, right? I looked after my own schedule and had clients, right? If you look back on what it looks like. So for me, when I first started Geeky Girl, which I think is a good point for this whole entrepreneurial journey discussion, that was in 2009. And no, at no point did anybody sit down and say, okay, so you need to organize your schedule and you need to know what's going on. It was just sort of like, go. And so there was a lot of hard knocks that happened. And through the process, I think some of my biggest hits in terms of air quotes, things that actually did hit and take me down. There was one year that was really significant. I was approached by a coach who said, oh, I know how to help you run your business. I know how to make you successful. And I enrolled in her course. I made some great friends. That's all. It took me a lot of money and I didn't get what I needed out of that at all, to be honest. But one of the things that I got out of that was because I was not prepared, because what ended up happening was that I believed her and she said I should, in air quotes, do this, that, and the next thing. And if I just listened to her and if I just did what she told me to, then I would have a successful business. The problem is that at no point did I pre-plan or pre-organize or design what I wanted my business to look like. So I just assumed, what happens when we assume, that she was right. And after I went through that experience, I went, well, hold on a minute. If I had known before she offered her opportunity that this was the direction I wanted to go with my business, I would have told her no because it didn't fit the direction. And so that was my turning point. I want to say that that was probably somewhere in around, I don't know, it's somewhere in around 2013, probably in a vague idea of where that came into the business. But at that point, it was like, you know what? It's going to be really important for me to plan. And I've been a huge planner since.
And this is exactly why I thought it would be so important for people, especially in the last quarter, to hear your thoughts and your take on how to plan. So we are very much in this community learning from each other. Again, no MBAs for everybody, some MBAs for some people. But when it comes to this idea of you having experience coming to the table with being an entrepreneur early on in your life and continuing to get better and better each and every day, how would you challenge people out there to think about how to get started with planning or how to be present with the planning that they need to do right now so that they're not thinking, oh, if I had known, because they're knowing from hearing your words today?
Well, first of all, learn from everybody's mistakes around you and pay attention. So when people make mistakes, it's important for me, it's important when I see a mistake somebody else has made is to go, wow, okay, what can I learn from their mistakes? That's number one. So please take heed. And the reason why I say that is learn from my mistakes. When we're talking about how should we do it, and Maryal, because you and I spend a lot of time together, you know I'm going to answer that this way. There's a cornucopia of ways to do it. And because I am a neurodivergent human being, my brain is very fun to deal with. And I don't subscribe to a neurotypical way of doing things, right? Your neurotypical way is very corporate. It's very broken down. I don't know, it just feels icky to me. So for me, I can't go that route. Now, there's some people who are listening who are like, oh, I totally love doing all of those things and I like doing the blah, blah, blahs. Great, have at her. But there's so many of us who go into entrepreneurial journeys simply because we are neurodivergent and because we don't like the way that corporate world feels. And so I find that a lot of us out here are neurodivergent. And so the number one thing is we have to figure out what works for you. And the only way to do that is to try and fail and try again, right? But when I think about right now, sitting at the beginning of quarter four, the number one thing I would like you to take away from in terms of how do I start thinking about planning is to go, what do I want to accomplish in 2025? And you may think, oh my gosh, Angela, that's like so far away. We're not even done 2024 yet. But now's the time to start thinking about what you want to accomplish between now and 2025, because there's going to be some things that pop up at the end of the year, these opportunities, and I put quotes around them. People are going to say, hey, I can help you with this, that, or the next thing. If you don't know where you're going, it's like that old adage says, right? If you don't plan, somebody else is going to make the plan for you. That's exactly what happened to me that year. And that's the number one thing. At least figure out where you're trying to head and what are the things you want to accomplish.
I think it's great advice. It's just like when we talk about the business plan, the idea of a business plan having an avatar that we are building our clinics for, the ideal patient that we want to serve. It's the same that's how I was able to translate those words when we were looking at planning together in terms of, okay, what are the goals that I want to achieve? What is the type of care I want to deliver? And to whom do I want to deliver it, rather? So, in terms of when a person is sitting down to look at 2025 and the goals they want to achieve, sometimes that can be overwhelming. And so, how do you advise on wherever a person or however a person feels comfortable to get to that point of identifying what they want to achieve? How do you address breaking things down so that they are achievable?
Okay, so the number one thing is it's always overwhelming. Even if you plan regularly, it can be very overwhelming. And there's different parts that are going to be overwhelming. Some people, it's overwhelming for them to think about that. Oh my gosh, the whole year from now, I don't know, that's just too big. Other people, for me, those are the easy things for me. It's when I start to break it down and go, oh my God, okay, I've got to get this done. I've got to get that done. Once I start to break it down, it becomes overwhelming sometimes for me, right? So where you are in your overwhelm, be okay with that. So if you're overwhelmed saying like, I don't know how I can even think big picture, or if you're like, oh, all the little pieces bug me, right? That's totally okay. It doesn't matter where. But the concept of creating this business, you talked about the avatar, like who you want to work for, who do you want to create your business for? To me, that never worked for me. And I look at it in an entirely different way that's still the same way. To me, I look at what kind of business do I want to have? What do I want to wake up to every morning? And then with that business, who am I serving best doing that, right? Because ultimately, those are the people who are going to want to be served by me anyway, because those are the people who are attracted to the way that I do business or the way that I can help them. So, big picture wise, think about what are the big things you want to accomplish. Now, some people like to think money. And that's okay. You could say, I want to make X amount of money this year. Maybe you want to say, I want to have X amount of new patients this year. Or maybe it's, I want to expand my services into this, that, and the next thing this year. There's lots of different ways that you can identify what goals you have. And I always say, make sure you have a lot of goals so that you can choose which ones to move forward with. Because there's a lot of times when we choose our goals and we create our plan, but we're not actually thinking about how much time these things are going to take, right? And so we can't accomplish everything, but it's great to have a great repository of goals to have.
And I think this also speaks to just why people listen to this podcast. This is a podcast that is representing the community of the direct primary care movement. And when people are able to find their kindred spirit in someone who also just opened their DPC or someone who opened their DPC in Oklahoma specifically, when we're able to find community, then that also provides a place where we can bring our thoughts and thoughts about planning specifically too, because if you're talking with a DPC doctor in your state or in who is a year ahead of you in terms of the same type of micro practice that you're achieving, it's really helpful to, like you said, to learn from other people's mistakes. And because I sure as heck have made a lot in DPC, that's a normal thing. And but when we're able to say like, I love that idea, let me tell you about my experience with trying something similar, I think it also helps in terms of giving examples of successes and challenges in the DPC space to talk to DPC physicians in particular. So I love that. And I think also this idea that you're not necessarily thinking about the ideal avatar patient, but this idea that you are building the business you want, it also really, when you flip the mirror, it really also points to this fact that you and I talked about, I think earlier today, that you have to build the business that you want so that you can keep doing the business. One of the things that I love is on our calendar, like if you go to our contact page on at bigtreesmd.com, it says like a holiday is our anniversary, our wedding anniversary. A holiday is the day that we're taking off to celebrate our kids' birthdays. Like those are holidays because we say they are so. And so when it comes to even building a business that's taking care of you so that you can take care of the business, I think that really also feeds back into planning that works for you.
And on top of that, the people who you attract as clients, the people who you are attracting as patients, they're going to be people who respect that because they believe that as well. And it becomes part of the avatar of who you're looking for.
So when we look at setting goals, whether they're big goals and we're working them down, I love that you said this before, taking big boulders and breaking them into sand progressively, or looking at, okay, past the end of my nose, I see this task that needs to be done, and this task is related to the next bigger thing, and you go upwards like that, whatever works for you. I think that this idea, going back to just what I said, like the honoring yourself as part of the planning process very frequently, especially as successful physicians who have graduated medical school, we a lot of the times should on ourselves when we don't get things right the first time. So what does shoulding on yourself mean to you, and how do you talk to people to get them through the shoulding on themselves?
Yeah, so I definitely use that phrase a lot. Stop shitting on yourself, or I don't want to shit on you right now. It's because we have an internal voice. That internal voice is loud and proud, and it has lots to say. And a lot of times it's given us a lot of shoulds. And we stack ourselves up against an immeasurable force that we just can't get to. And yes, it's great for us to be striving for more, but it is really important for us to also honor where we have been and where we are today, to really look at your successes and say, hey, I've done these great things. So the whole concept of shoulding is you're putting yourself down. You're not giving yourself credit for what you're doing. Instead, you're saying, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I should be doing this, or oh, I should behave this way. Those are either societal stories or they're stories from your childhood. They're stories that are stuck in your head. Maybe they're stories that don't serve you anymore. And when I start to hear people shoulding on themselves, I start to think, are you saying that because that's something you really believe, or is it something that you just think you should be saying to yourself, right? So when I hear people shitting on themselves, I'll typically say, hey, don't talk about my friend like that. Think about if the words that you say, if you're saying something out loud and you catch yourself, because you might not be listening to yourself the same way you, after this podcast, maybe you'll think about the words you say differently. But if I say to myself, oh, geez, I suck at this and should be doing these things and that things and these things. And if I listen to it and think, geez, if my friend was saying that to themselves, what would I say? I'd probably tell them, girl, you're okay. Like, no big deal. Chill out. So that whole concept of shoulding comes from that internal voice, that negative Nelly, so to speak, that is those guilt monsters that are taking over your brain space.
So, what about when a person is reflecting on their day, whether it be a conversation with their partner or whether it be a conversation in a group of people who are experiencing things at the same time in different places potentially? When you speak about listening to that voice and taking care of that friend who is also you, the idea of taking care of yourself, your quote unquote friend differently by even just the words that we choose. We know that that's important because we talk to our patients about positive self-talk and whatnot all the time. We, especially in primary care, we're pretty much social workers most of the time. So
Yes.
when it comes to being able to encourage the positive reflections, learning from things, having things be opportunities rather than, well, the problem that I had today was, do you have any tips on journaling or ways to dissect thoughts so that a person can not only take those thoughts, reframe them, but also put them into the greater plan that they've already started working on?
So first and foremost, I think that this goes against the grain of most everything that's out there. So brace yourself for what I'm about to tell you. Your business is not your baby. If your business falters and falls apart tomorrow, you can create a new one. If your child passes away, that's an entirely different story. Your business is not your baby. Okay. So stop taking it so personally. If things don't work out in the business, it's simply a moment for you to say, okay, I tried this thing. And I often say it in this manner regularly as we're planning or we're reviewing our plan. It's okay, I have made this plan and here's the action steps I'm going to take because we have no control over the outcome. We only can control the actions we take. And so I made this plan and here's the actions I chose to take. So then when I review, I can say, well, okay, I didn't hit the goal. But did I take the actions? If the answer is yes, okay, well, then those actions were the wrong ones. Let's try something different. If it was, I didn't hit the goal and I didn't do the actions, well, am I going to try the actions again or do I need to change them because I don't like them? So take it away from yourself. Don't say, I failed. No, 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 the goal didn't work out or the actions didn't work out. Maybe you thought you'd like to do 13 lives a week, but then you realized that that was something you absolutely hated. And so you don't want to do that anymore. Okay, there's other ways to make it happen, right? So choose different actions. But take the emotional connection to the business away and simply look at it from, okay, this is what we were planning on doing. How did we accomplish it? Did we like it or did we not like it? And there's no judgment. If you didn't like it, try something else. There's a million different ways to try it.
So let me ask here, as we're talking about actions,
Yes.
one of the big things that we love in the DPC space, no matter if you're a micro practice doctor or if you are in a bigger practice, is turning actions into automations. So talk to us about how does one even think about, oh, this is something that could be automated so that those actions are taken without you having to put more time into it.
So the number one thing to remember is automations are robots. Robots cannot make decisions like humans can. So if there's something that needs to be done that requires a human to be able to decide, it's like you program something, you say, if this happens, then do that. But if you say, if this happens and it kind of looks like that, then do that, you can't automate it. The robot can't think that way, right? So you can look at the whole process and go, okay, if this happens, then that definitely happens. But if this happens and that happens, but kind of like that, well, then we need a human. So it's possible you can automate maybe the front end of it or the back end of it or even the middle, but break up the entire thing and choose which pieces. But always remember, it's if I need to make a decision, if there's some kind of human brain required, then you can't automate it.
And this is a loaded question because I know the answer to this part, but for those people out there who are listening and are wondering, are there tools to help me automate things? One of the biggest tools that you had taught me was about Goblin tools. So can you tell us about Goblin tools and how that helps a person think about, could this be an automation and to what step would the automation kick in?
So Goblin Tool specifically isn't necessarily an automation piece, but it is an AI piece that helps us with language. And so some of us with neurodivergent tendencies sometimes have a hard time with reading words on a page because we can't tell the voice inflection on it. Goblin Tools is great. I can, if somebody sends me an email and I go, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that, I can copy and paste that into Goblin Tools and it'll tell me what it means. It'll say like the inflection is this way or that way. I can also say, can you give me a reply to it as well, which is fantastic. So it'll help me give me a reply. Those are some things that Goblin Tools helps us a lot with in Geeky Girl. One of the other things that Goblin Tools has helped other people with is it allows you to break down a task. So I can go to Goblin Tools and say, what are the steps in writing a blog post? And it'll give me steps. And then if I'm like, that step number 3 isn't, it's not broken down far enough. I can say, I can go to the side of number 3 and click the button and say, break it down even further. And the Goblin Tools will break it down even further. So it is a great way to help you to build your process library. If you're looking for help, you can't figure out how to write down all those details. Goblin Tools has been great for lots of that language stuff for us.
And thank you for that clarification, because yes, it's not necessarily an AI to do things, to create the automations, but it's a way to, like you said, to break stuff down and help you break stuff down into tasks to ask then, could this be done without a person putting a contingency plan on it? Or is this something that an automation could do? And what about very popular out there are task managers, programs like Monday.com, Asana, and ClickUp. ClickUp is your jam in particular, but how do these tools help with running a business, and who should think about using these?
Gosh, if you own a business, I'm going to shit on you. If you're running a business, it makes running a business so much easier to have something to manage all of that stuff. Paper, books, sticky notes. I mean, we start everywhere. And of course, when I started this business, we didn't have those kinds of tools, right? We did have to deal with really, I started out with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and then I went to like legal size paper, and I was still running out of room. At least with having a tool system, like an actual project management tool, basically is what they are, in place, it allows you to be able to keep all of the balls in the air at the same time. I can look at everything that's happening in the business and know where we are in the different places. I can also create a repository there. It's like, I'd like to do this, but I don't have time for it now, but I'm going to stick it over there, right? And it allows you to be able to not lose anything. There is nothing worse in the world, in my world, there's nothing worse in my world than having something that I can't forget. I have to remember this. I have to remember that. The more things we have in our brain that we're saying, I can't forget, you're using up the space in your brain that could be used for creativity, could be used for fun, could be used for emotions and energy or whatever. So now, because like you said, I mean, I used to use Asana, but ClickUp has been my baby since 2019. But now I don't have to worry. I don't need to worry about whether or not it's saved somewhere. I don't have to keep it in the back of my mind somewhere. I put it in ClickUp and I can let it go because I know exactly where it is inside ClickUp when I need to use it for the next piece of the planning.
And I think that it is such a cool time to be using these task managers because of working together with you. I am also on ClickUp, but I love the AI even within ClickUp. I have not used AIs in the other programs, but when it comes to like, oh, what were the things related to this task? It literally was able to pull from SOPs and all of the information all over the ClickUp to say, here you go. Here's the 4 things that were related to this task. I'm a very visual person, and so it helps me, instead of remembering where things are in different folders, the AI helps me visualize like everything in one place. And for me, if you've known me long enough, you know that I love one button to do things. If I have more than one button, it potentially will get left to the wayside. But so I think that it absolutely can be harnessed even in the direct primary care space, just for tasks that we have to do, not necessarily dealing with patient information, but when it comes to just the onboarding workflow or other things that are requiring multiple people to take action on, and the ability to not only assign a task to somebody, but also put a due date for that task, because it can also help you reevaluate, like, are things getting done? So let me ask there, when it comes to getting things done, you talked about having goals, working the goals into your planner, into your plan for 2025 in our case. How do you periodically suggest people reevaluate? Like, am I achieving these goals? Am I on track?
Yeah, the biggest thing I see that people will do is they'll set big goals, whether they create themselves a vision board or whether they actually write down what their goals are and then they tuck it away somewhere. Will that work? Yes. Is it efficient and effective? No. Will it probably happen in the time frame you're looking for? Definitely not. However, those are still valuable tools, right? But the check-in is what's important. I subscribe to a belief that we create our goals once a year, and then every quarter we check in, every month we check in. And so throughout every check-in, whether it's the quarterly or the monthly, the question is, how did the last one go? Are we still heading in the direction that we want to head in? Of the things that we said we were going to do this quarter, do we still feel like those are the right choices, or do we need to pivot? The goals you set are not a turn-by-turn navigation by any stretch of the imagination. They're simply a GPS, right? Like, I want to get there. So it's like saying, I want to drive from Bismarck, North Dakota to, I don't know, somewhere else in the States, Washington, D.C. Okay. And you say, that's where I'm going. But that doesn't mean to say that you're not going to like jet off the path a little bit and maybe you're going to go to Nashville on the way. I don't think that's a very smart idea, but you could, right? Like, but you are going to end up in that place. So how are you going to take that road to get there? So you don't have to take the straight path. You can veer off. And that's where the check-ins come in place, right? Every month, every quarter, you say, are we on the right path? Is there something we need to do? I mean, the biggest example we've had that we all know about was nobody predicted that the first quarter of 2020 was going to be what it was. The rest of us had planned 2019. In 2019, we planned what our 2020 was going to be. And then 2020 happened and we all went, well, the first quarter's out, right? So you need to be able to be flexible in your plan. You need to be able, I mean, we're not going to have another world pandemic, but there's still other things that are going to happen in your life and your business. Gosh forbid you have a pet that gets sick, or a child or a spouse or a family member or something, and you have to take time away from your business. That impacts what happens to your business. Or maybe something happens in your business in general. Maybe somebody you relied on for referrals disappears and they've cut their practice and now you need to find somebody else who does that. You have to be flexible in being able to figure out what's the next phase and is that the right one for me.
So I hope that this has been very helpful for people in terms of just being in the space of thinking about 2025 if you haven't already started your planning for this quarter as well as next year. So Angela, where can people find out more about you and about what you're doing, and where can they find your podcast?
So the Overgivers Anonymous podcast is wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm sure you can find it there. Absolutely love doing that show for everybody. And of course, it is what it is. But we are overgivers. We like to give, but it's important to be able to balance our lives and business. And that's what that podcast is all about. And then, of course, our website is geekygirl.ca for Canada. And on there, you'll find a bunch of information, a wealth of knowledge through our blog posts and all kinds of information that we'd love to share with you to grow your business the way you want to. And of course, we have the Rockstar Success Circle, which is all about how do we plan our business? How do we do the check-ins? We have lots of planning parties. We don't call them strategic planning. We do have planning parties. We have a good time with that. And we also have the Neurodivergent Business Summit coming up in February as well.
So be sure to check out the blog accompanying Angela's podcast at mydpcstory.com. You'll also find links in the show notes to the links that she is talking about. Thank you so much, Angela, and happy 2025 to all of us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of My DPC Story, highlighting the physician experience in the world of direct primary care. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you want to dive deeper into the direct primary care movement, consider joining our My DPC Story Patreon community. Here, you'll have access to exclusive content, including more interview topics and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to My DPC Story on your podcast feed and follow us on social media as well. If you're able, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave us a review. It helps others to find the podcast. Until next time, stay informed, stay healthy, and keep advocating for DPC. Read more about DPC news on the daily at dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Maryal Concepcion.